These are the final lyrics of a song, famously known for being reimagined by Johnny Cash in 2002. Hurt, originally composed by Nine Inch Nails, talks about recovering from a drug addiction and reflecting on the experience. Being the last track on a concept album, the main character of the song realizes there's still time to undo the pain he's caused, both to himself and to others, while simultaneously thinking about starting over somewhere far away, far from his problems and temptations. The concept is a romantic one because who among us hasn't thought about disappearing into another life? This idea, however, often raises a question. Are you actually moving on and starting fresh, or simply running away? Because you can't just run away from your life, right? Or can you? In 1975, in Boulder, Colorado, Henry meets Julia. They fall in love, build a life together, argue about work, make plans for the future. Then, without warning, Julia suffers an episode and is diagnosed with early-onset dementia. Firewatch's text-based opening is one of the most devastating introductions to a video game I've seen to date. It asks you to participate in Henry's grief over slowly losing the person he loves, but none of your choices can change where the story is heading. Granted, a big part of those feelings are carried by Chris Remo's incredibly evocative soundtrack, so I suppose it doesn't help if you're the type of person who gets easily moved by music. Finally, Henry faces a dilemma. Move Julia to a home so she gets constant care, or care for her on your own. In either case, her condition doesn't improve. Some days she's still there, others gone completely. Once reality becomes impossibly hard to live with and Julia is handed over to her parents in Australia, Henry picks up a job in Wyoming as a firewatcher. At first glance, Firewatch may look like a cozy hiking simulator. Lavish forests, golden canyons, endless hiking trails. It all ties together into a wonderfully calm, inviting package. Exactly the kind of place someone might choose if they wanted to disappear for a while. Of course, Henry didn't pick this gig because he's a nature lover.
I got stung by a bee.
Okay.
He was looking for isolation, for distance. Somewhere without obligations, without responsibilities weighing over his shoulders. He was running away from his life, choosing avoidance over anything else. Contrary to his expectations, however, he doesn't end up being alone. On the other end of the handheld radio he receives upon arrival to the watchtower sits Delilah, his shitty boss who's going to get him killed.
I don't remember it being that bad. It's not even named on our topos.
What about shitty boss is gonna get me killed hill?
Over the course of the game, Henry gets closer to Delilah. It's only natural to yearn for any human contact you can get when stuck in isolation for weeks or months on end, even if that contact is just a voice on the other end of the receiver. As the only piece of technology in the forest, Henry's radio becomes fascinating. It creates a safe, sort of intimate relationship between him and the emotional lifeline Delilah is. She's close enough to keep him company, but far enough that he never has to truly let her in. This kind of seclusion, however, brings a certain caveat with it. The longer you're alone, the more suspicious of your surroundings you may become. A sense of paranoia can settle in. You may think your boss is talking about you behind your back. You may hear weird rustling in the bushes. Or you may think that someone's spying on you.
Did you just cough?
No. Did you just cough?
No.
Oh, fuck.
Fuck.
As is the case with nearly every good narrative-driven game, Firewatch has a mystery lying at its core. In this case, however, I find it fascinating how well it aligns with the motivations of the main character. The mystery serves Henry in a way, because if there really is something weird happening in the woods, then maybe the problems he's trying to run away from aren't his biggest concern anymore. Much like a hobby or a job people may throw themselves in, it occupies his mind, helping him forget the baggage he's left behind. But this kind of baggage has a habit of resurfacing, and before long it becomes clear Henry's not the only person who came to the park hoping distance would solve everything. Now, to continue my analysis, I have to get into the spoiler territory, so if you'd rather experience the game for yourself, this is the time to stop watching. But make sure to come back once you've rolled credits. Firewatch's biggest reveal is the fact that there is no conspiracy whatsoever. Henry and Delilah are neither the subjects of a grand-scale psychological experiment, nor being spied on by the government. The only thing to be found in Shoshone National Forest is guilt, grief, and avoidance. 3 years before the events of the game, another fire lookout named Ned brought his 12-year-old son Brian with him to the park. After Brian tragically died in a climbing accident, Ned couldn't bring himself to face what happened, so instead he went into hiding and later fabricated the conspiracy that's been haunting Henry and Delilah throughout the game. Ned takes Henry's fantasy to its logical extreme. His way of running is actually staying in the forest where his son died. His guilt ran so deep he chose to abandon his life entirely and become a hermit, also he wouldn't have to deal with what transpired. Moreover, once Henry uncovers the truth, Ned doesn't face him either. He continues running, deeper into the Shoshone, choosing escape yet again. Delilah makes a similar choice, but in a much more heartbreaking way. Throughout the game, she and Henry build this strong, emotional intimacy, and the moment they could finally meet, she just leaves.
Hello? Delilah! Damn it.
She tells him she's going to wait, but instead she boards the rescue chopper before Henry ever arrives at her lookout tower. Plagued by guilt over not reporting the boy staying in the forest, she decides to run and start anew somewhere else. It's not the first time she lies either. Not out of malice, but because she's very much lost herself. Being flawed makes her human, and I think that's why her character is such a strongly written one overall. Looking at Henry, Delilah, and Ned together, a pattern starts to emerge. It becomes clear every one of them tries to escape, hide away, hoping distance will spare them from facing their pain. In the end, Firewatch dismantles the fantasy they all wanted to believe in. There is no conspiracy, no new life, nothing waiting in all Shoshone that could fix any of them. The forest gave Henry space, but it could never give him closure. When the fire season ends, he still has to go home. The only thing he managed to do was delay facing reality. So can you run away from your problems? You can definitely try. Sometimes it feels like there is just no other option, but the action of running itself won't make those problems go away. Whether it's growing responsibility, a traumatic event, an addiction, distance can buy you time, offer some perspective, but it cannot do the healing for you. All your issues will need to be addressed sooner or later, because until you do so, you will remain haunted.